I don't know why the summer feels different, but the moment I saw him again, standing at the edge of my cousin's garden with his sunglasses pushed up into his hair and a soft smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth, I knew something was going to shift. Maybe not in the world, but definitely in me. We hadn't seen each other in nearly a year, and yet he still had that maddening calm about him. Like nothing could rattle him. Like he already knew how people worked, and he could see straight through their bravado and into their nerves. He was always like that. Quiet, observant, a little smug, a lot magnetic. My cousin invited a bunch of us to the family's countryside cottage for a long weekend. A sort of annual thing they do to feel closer to nature, whatever that means. Usually it's a blur of BBQs, card games, and pretending I enjoy kayaking. This year, though, he was coming. My cousin's friend. Let's call him Callum. He wasn't family, but he might as well have been. He'd been to enough of our events, stayed over enough times, sat at enough of our dinner tables. And yet, he always carried himself like an outsider who chose to be included, like he belonged, but only on his own terms. I used to watch him when I was younger, always wondering what it was about him that made people lean in just to hear him speak. And now here I am, 24 years old, supposedly over the childish crushes and hidden glances, supposedly confident, composed, and definitely not the kind of guy who still blushes when a friend of the family tosses him a lazy grin across the lawn. But God, that grin. We arrived late Friday afternoon. The countryside air smelled like pine needles in the last of the sun, the sky slowly dipping into a soft orange as we unpacked our things. The cottage was old and creaky in the best way, with warped wooden floors and mismatched furniture that somehow made it feel alive. There were only 4 bedrooms for 6 of us, meaning someone would have to double up. I pretended not to care when Callum slung his duffel bag onto the floor of my room, like it was the most natural thing in the world, like it hadn't made my heart do that awful fluttery thing I thought I'd outgrown. He glanced over his shoulder, raised an eyebrow, and said, "You cool with this?" I nodded too quickly and muttered something like, "Yeah, course," before turning to busy myself with arranging my books by the windowsill like a nervous librarian. I could feel the heat crawling up my neck. He made himself at home with that same confident ease I remembered, shirt pulled over his head in one fluid movement, muscles shifting under golden skin. And that tattoo on his shoulder I'd forgotten about catching the light. I looked away, pretending to check my phone, even though we had no signal out here. Typical. "You still reading those weird psychology thrillers?" he asked, glancing at my stack. "Only the ones with hot detectives and unresolved trauma." I joked, and he laughed, low, rich, genuine. It was that kind of laugh that made the air feel too thick. That laugh that settled into your bones like warmth, even when the room wasn't cold. There were other people around, of course. My cousin, his girlfriend, 2 other mates. But somehow, every time we gathered around the fire pit or passed each other in the cramped kitchen, it was like Callum's presence grew louder. Every time his shoulder brushed mine, every time he leaned close to whisper a joke, every time he smiled that just for me kind of smile, I felt the same thing I always had. That restless ache in my chest. The one that came with the knowledge that I wanted more, and the fear of what it would mean if I said it. This weekend was meant to be a break. A bit of fresh air. Instead, it felt like walking straight into the storm I'd spent years pretending didn't exist. And the worst part? I didn't want to walk away from it this time. Callum and I didn't grow up together, but it sometimes felt like we had. He and my cousin met at uni. First-year housemates who bonded over late-night takeaway and some mutual hatred for group presentations. Ever since, Callum had sort of attached himself to our family orbit, and no one minded. In fact, everyone loved him for it. He was charming in that low-effort way that made you want to try harder around him. The first time we properly spoke was years ago, during a holiday gathering. I was 18, awkward as hell, and holed up in the kitchen pretending to know how to carve a turkey. He waltzed in with a half-empty glass of wine, leaned on the counter beside me, and said, "You look like you're auditioning for a horror film." I'd laughed too hard and ended up dropping the knife. He still teases me about that, like it's our running joke. "Try not to murder the potatoes this time," he quipped earlier that evening as I mashed them with more force than necessary. I rolled my eyes but didn't fight the smile. Shut up. You still think boiling pasta counts as culinary skill. And yet, I've survived this long. Tragic, really. That was us. Constant low-key ribbing, like we were each other's favorite source of entertainment. But beneath all the teasing, there was something else. A quiet comfort I couldn't quite explain. Something about how he made me feel seen, even in a room full of louder voices. He listened, not just with his ears, but with his eyes. Like he could read me just by watching the twitch of a smile or the way I shifted my weight mid-conversation. That first evening in the cottage, we stayed up late playing board games in the lounge with the others. Callum sat cross-legged on the floor beside me, our knees brushing whenever one of us shifted. I don't know if he noticed, but I did. Every time. Like clockwork. At one point, he leaned close to whisper a joke about my cousin's dramatic dice rolling, and I caught a whiff of his cologne. Something woody and clean that made me want to lean in further. I didn't, but I thought about it. The next morning brought the complication. We'd all planned to go hiking. Nothing too ambitious. Just a trail behind a cottage that looped through the woods and ended by a quiet stream. But in the chaos of packing and breakfast, someone realized we were one sleeping bag short for the planned night under the stars. It was Callum who said casually, like it meant nothing, "I don't mind sharing." I froze mid-toast. My cousin raised an eyebrow. "With who?" Callum looked over at me, then shrugged. "You okay with that?" "Yeah," I said, voice just slightly too high. "Sure, no problem." Inside, my heart was pounding like I'd just sprinted the whole trail already. The hike itself was uneventful, save for the ridiculous number of times Callum offered me a hand over roots or ditches, even when I didn't really need it. "You're the clumsy one," I muttered once, just to deflect the way his touch lingered each time. "Maybe," he said, grinning, "but at least I'm charming about it." That night, as the fire crackled and conversations dipped into sleepy murmurs, we all bundled up in our sleeping bags. The sky above was clear, hundreds of stars blinking down through the gaps in the trees. The others quickly drifted off, lost in the hum of insects and the warmth of the fire's leftovers. Callum and I lay beside each other under a single zipped-together sleeping bag, both of us pretending to be completely at ease. "This okay?" he asked softly, his voice just above a whisper. Our arms were touching now, bare skin to bare skin. My breath caught before I nodded. "Yeah, I managed. It's warm." "Too warm?" he asked, teasing again, his voice low. "Shut up." He chuckled, then grew quiet. For a long stretch, we just lay there, eyes on the sky, hearts probably beating too loudly in our chests. There was a moment when he shifted slightly, his fingers brushing against mine under the cover. He didn't pull away. Neither did I. We stayed like that, silent, suspended in something neither of us had the courage to name. My mind was a mess of what-ifs and don't be stupid and maybe. So many maybes. And the worst part? I kept imagining what it would be like if he turned to face me, if he reached up and touched my jaw, if he kissed me. I imagined it so vividly that I had to remind myself it hadn't happened. But the thing was, he didn't seem not to notice. He didn't shy away. If anything, he seemed closer, like his breaths had changed rhythm. Slower, softer. I stayed awake far longer than I should have, tracing the outline of the stars with my eyes and the shape of his hand with my imagination. Every now and then he shifted slightly, and I'd catch myself holding my breath. At one point he whispered, "You ever wonder about things turn out differently?" I turned my head just slightly. "What do you mean?" He was still looking at the sky. "Like, if you made one different choice somewhere, said one thing you were too scared to say." I swallowed hard. "Yeah, all the time." He nodded but didn't speak again. And for the first time, I thought maybe I wasn't the only one with something unsaid. It happened the next afternoon, after the rest of the group decided to head back early. My cousin's girlfriend had twisted her ankle on a patch of uneven ground. And while it wasn't serious, it gave everyone a reason to pack up camp and return to the cottage a day earlier than planned. Everyone except me and Callum. We'd gone off ahead on a separate trail, hoping to explore a small ridge my cousin had pointed out on the map. By the time we made it back to the stream, the others were long gone, and so was our ride. Callum checked his phone, frowning. No signal. No kidding, I muttered, already eyeing the rapidly darkening sky. We'd spent too long talking by the ridge, laughing about stupid things, and pretending like time didn't exist out here. He grinned, unfazed. We could try walking back, but it'll take hours. I glanced at the sky again. Dusk was already creeping in, and with it came the cold. So what, we just stay here? He shrugged. We got the tent, some snacks. It's not like we've never done this before. True, but not alone. Not just the two of us. The others had taken one of the sleeping bags. All we had left was a zipped-together double we'd used the night before. Now, even more of a statement, without the group around to make it feel casual. Unless you're scared, he added with a smirk, nudging my shoulder. I shoved him back, laughing. Terrified. Of your terrible jokes. We set up the tent in near silence. Not awkward, exactly, but loaded. Every brush of our hands while unrolling the mat. Every shared glance as we tried to get the zipper to cooperate. Every small laugh felt heavier, like something unspoken sat just beneath the surface, waiting for one of us to acknowledge it. Inside the tent, it was tight, our bags stacked near the flap, our legs tangled by necessity more than comfort. We sat facing each other, knees touching, eating crisps from a shared packet, and pretending we weren't silently aware of every inch of contact. You all right? He asked eventually, voice low. Yeah, just tired. That wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. The truth was, I was scared. Not being out here or stuck overnight, but of what being alone with him might mean. Of how close we already were. Of how badly I wanted to close the gap. And of what would happen if I did. Funny, Callum said, tossing a crisp into his mouth. You always used to fill every silence. I looked up. I did not. You did. Uni holidays, remember? You'd just ramble. It was endearing. Thanks, I said dryly. Glad my nervous chatter left a lasting impression. His eyes crinkled. It did. Something in the way he said it made my stomach twist. Not just the words, but the way he was looking at me. Like he meant it. Like it mattered. It was getting colder. So we burrowed into the sleeping bag again, trying to make it feel like nothing. But this time, there was no safety in numbers. No noisy group. Just the quiet hum of wind outside, the warmth of his body inches from mine, and the loud, endless beating of my heart. He lay on his side, facing me. I stayed on my back, staring at the nylon ceiling, every nerve on edge. You ever think about that night? He asked suddenly. I blinked. Which one? At Christmas, when we stayed up till 4 watching that awful action film. You fell asleep halfway through, head on my shoulder. My cheeks flared. You remember that? Course I do. There was a pause, so small, it barely qualified as silence. But it was there, pulsing between us. You talk in your sleep, you know, he added, voice lighter now. I groaned. Don't. What did I say? He grinned. Nothing embarrassing. Just, you said my name. My breath caught. You don't have to explain it, he said quickly, his tone softer now. It was years ago. Except I wasn't going to explain it. I didn't even know how to. I've thought about that night, too. I admitted, voice barely above a whisper. He didn't reply straight away, and I risked glancing over. His eyes were already on me, warm, unreadable. You're doing that thing again, he murmured. What thing? Thinking too hard. I can hear it. I laughed, nervous. Sorry, it's just a lot. He shifted slightly closer, the sleeping bag rustling, his hand brushing against mine. It wasn't deliberate, or maybe it was. Either way, neither of us moved away. I always wondered, he said quietly, if you ever wanted something different. What do you mean? He hesitated, then exhaled slowly. From us. From me. I swallowed. Hard. The air inside the tent was suddenly thinner, too warm, too tight. I did, I said. I do. It came out before I could stop it. Not a grand confession. Not even a full sentence of truth. But enough. Callum didn't react for a moment. Then, gently, so gently I could have imagined it, he slid his fingers between mine. My chest clenched. I couldn't look at him, couldn't speak. I just let the silence grow, stretching between us like a held breath. His thumb brushed the back of my hand. "Me too," he whispered. My whole body felt like it was vibrating, on the edge of something, trembling with it. And then he did something I didn't expect. He shifted even closer, his forehead pressing lightly to mine. Not a kiss. Not yet. Just contact. Intentional. Intimate. "Is this okay?" he asked. I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, though it was probably just minutes, breathing the same air, sharing the same warmth. My hand in his, my heart threatening to crack open. I didn't know what would happen after this. I didn't know what we were becoming. But I knew one thing. I didn't want to go back to pretending. The warmth of his forehead against mine lingered long after he'd drawn away. We'd eventually rolled onto our backs again, side by side, fingers still lightly linked beneath the sleeping bag, not holding hands in a way that screamed something's changed, but not in a way that meant nothing, either. Just suspended, like the moment itself wasn't quite over. Neither of us had said anything since. The air inside the tent had grown thick with unspoken thoughts and tension that neither of us dared to cut. I kept stealing glances at him out corner of my eye, searching for signs that he regretted what he'd said, what he'd done. But all I saw was his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm, his brows faintly drawn like he was deep in his own thoughts. Maybe I should have said something, but I didn't want to break whatever this was, whatever this fragile, careful thing we'd stepped into. My heart was still thudding too loud in my ears to think clearly, and then he spoke, softly, like he was afraid the tent walls would hear. "You're being quiet again." I swallowed. "So are you." He hummed, the sound vibrating faintly in his throat. "Suppose—" I don't know what I meant to say next. I turned my head to face him. "Neither do I." His eyes met mine. Not just a glance, an actual look. Unwavering. Honest. Like he was trying to read something in me I wasn't sure I'd written clearly enough. "It's not like this is something we've ever talked about," he murmured. Because I didn't think I was allowed to. The words came out too fast, too raw. I hadn't planned to say them. I hadn't even planned to speak at all. But they'd been sitting there, lodged in my chest, for far too long. Callum's brow creased. "What do you mean?" I hesitated. I could feel the tremble starting in my hands again, could feel my breath falter. "You're my cousin's friend. You. I didn't think you'd ever even look at me like that. And I didn't want to ruin anything by hoping." He was quiet for a moment, eyes searching mine again. "Do you really think I haven't looked at you like that?" "I don't know." I let out a humorless laugh. "I've spent years convincing myself I imagined it." He sat up slightly, resting on one elbow, his silhouette outlined by the faint blue of the moon filtering through the tent. "You didn't," he said quietly. The air left my lungs. I sat up too, mirroring his position. We were inches apart now. No blankets or shadows to blur the distance between us. Just space. Fragile and full of things unsaid. "Callum," my voice cracked. "This can't just be a one-time thing. Not for me." "It's not," he said too quickly. Then he rubbed the back of his neck, eyes darting away briefly. "I didn't say anything before because I didn't want to make things weird. Your family, everything. We've always been in the same circle. I thought if I crossed a line, you'd pull away." I stared at him, heart pounding. "You really thought that?" He looked at me, eyes soft. "I didn't want to lose you." My throat tightened. I was already losing myself, pretending I didn't feel anything. His hand brushed against my knee under the sleeping bag, barely a touch, but it grounded me. "I think," he said slowly, "I've always felt something, but I didn't know how to say it. And then it just became easier not to." I nodded, tears stinging the back of my eyes. "It's scary, isn't it?" He nodded back. "Terrifying." Silence again. But this one felt different. Not empty. Not hesitant. Just full. Full of all the things we'd finally said and the weight they carried. "You were always just there," I whispered. At family things, birthdays, holidays. I used to dread them until I knew you were coming. His lips curved into a tiny smile. I used to hope I'd sit next to you. I laughed shakily, my chest aching with relief and disbelief, and every kind of emotion I didn't have a name for. This feels unreal. He leaned in a little. It doesn't to me. And that was it. The moment, the break in the tension, the breath I didn't know I'd been holding for years. I didn't think. I just moved, closed the last few inches between us, and pressed my forehead to his again. Only this time he didn't pull away. His hand cupped my cheek, tentative but steady, his thumb brushing across my skin like it had every right to be there. I let my eyes fall shut. I wanted to do this for so long. I whispered, "So have I." And then his lips found mine. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was soft, careful, like we both understood the fragility of what we were stepping into. But it was real. It was warm. It was him. All the quiet affection I'd buried for years blooming into something tangible. I melted into it, my fingers finding the fabric of his shirt, gripping it lightly like I was afraid he might disappear. He deepened the kiss slightly, one hand sliding the back of my neck. His touch wasn't demanding. It was reassuring, steady, like he was trying to tell me everything he hadn't said with words. When we finally pulled back, I kept my eyes closed for a moment, afraid to lose the feeling. "You okay?" he asked softly. I nodded. Better than okay. I opened my eyes to find him watching me with that same look again, the one I'd imagined too many times to count. Except now it was real. No second-guessing. No more pretending. "I meant what I said," he added. "This isn't just a night." "I don't want it to be," I replied, and my voice didn't waver this time. He leaned in again, not to kiss me, just to rest his head against mine. "We'll figure it out, yeah?" I smiled. "Yeah." We lay back down together, tangled now not just by circumstance, but by choice. He pulled the sleeping bag up around us, his arm draped over my waist, fingers slipping under the hem of my t-shirt to rest lightly against the bare skin of my back. Just touch, just connection. I'd spent years dreaming about this, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid to admit it. Waking up next to him felt like something out of a dream I'd once been afraid to have. His arm was still around me, heavy and warm. His breath brushed the back of my neck in slow, rhythmic waves, grounding me in the present, reminding me that last night had actually happened, that we had happened. I didn't move for a while. I just lay there, letting the early morning light creep into the seams of the tent, painting golden lines across the fabric. I could feel every inch of where we touched, his thigh against mine, the slight curve of his fingers at my waist, the slow exhale against my hair. There was nothing tense about the silence now. No more hesitations or what-ifs. Just a quiet kind of knowing. Still, my heart gave a nervous flutter as I finally whispered, "Are you awake?" He grunted, shifting slightly. His voice was sleep-rough and soft. Barely." I turned to face him. His eyes blinked open slowly, hazy with sleep, and then softened the second they landed on me. "Hi," he said. I smiled. "Hi." For a second, we just looked at each other. No masks, no pretending. Then he reached up, brushing his fingers lazily through my hair. "You always look this annoyingly pretty in the morning." I laughed, cheeks warming. "You're one to talk." "I'm just saying," he said with a sleepy grin. "If we're doing the whole waking up together thing now, you should have warned me you were a menace for my self-esteem." I nudged him with my knee. "You're impossible." "And you're blushing," he teased, clearly pleased with himself. I buried my face into his chest with a groan. "Shut up." His hand slid up and down my back in slow, lazy strokes. "You're cute when you're embarrassed." I felt his lips press lightly to the top of my head, and for a moment, the world felt impossibly small. Just the two of us, cocooned in warmth, tangled up in something that finally made sense. Then more quietly, he murmured, "This feels right, doesn't it?" I nodded against him. "Yeah, it really does." He shifted, so we were nose to nose again, his fingers still resting gently against my back. "So what now?" I let out a slow breath. Honestly, I haven't thought that far ahead. I was too busy convincing myself this would never happen. Well, it did, he said. And I don't want it to be just a weekend thing. I want more. His eyes were serious now. Open. Vulnerable. And that was what struck me most. He wasn't just caught up in the moment. He meant it. I traced a small circle on his chest with my fingertip, watching how his skin twitched beneath the touch. There'll be stuff we'll have to figure out. My cousin, for one. He groaned. Yeah, bit awkward, that. We don't have to tell anyone right away, I said. We can just see how things go. Between us. He nodded. I'd like that. The silence that followed was soft, full of unspoken agreement, the kind that made words feel almost unnecessary. Then he added, I think I knew I was screwed that time you made me watch that awful horror film, and then kept jumping into my lap every 5 minutes. I snorted. I did not jump into your lap. You absolutely did. You practically used me as a human shield. I rolled my eyes, grinning. You loved it. He raised an eyebrow. I didn't hate it. See, I teased. I've always been irresistible. He laughed, pulling me closer. All right, calm down, Casanova. For a moment, we just lay there in easy silence, limbs tangled, hearts slower now, but still very aware of one another. I felt light, like something heavy had been lifted off me, like I could finally breathe properly. Eventually, he tilted his head, eyes trailing lazily over my face. Do you think we'll make it work? I think we've already made it through the hardest part, I said softly, admitting it. He leaned in, kissing me again. This one was slower, deeper, like a promise. I've liked you for a long time, he said against my lips. I know, I whispered back. I think I always knew. He rested his forehead against mine again, our breaths mingling in the small space between us. Can I take you out properly when we're home? He asked. Like an actual date? My heart swelled. Yeah, I like that. He grinned. Brilliant. I've got loads of terrible restaurant choices saved just for this moment. Oh, good. I laughed. I was hoping you'd feed me bad pasta, and then try to kiss me with garlic breath. He rolled on top of me, playful now, pinning me with a grin. You'll love every second of it. I didn't doubt it, because whatever came next, awkward family conversations, messy logistics, figuring out how we fit together in the real world, it didn't matter as much as this did. Us, here, starting something real, together. Back home, everything felt louder. The buzz of traffic outside my window, the clatter of dishes downstairs, the hum of ordinary life returning to its usual pace. It was strange how quickly the weekend slipped into memory, like waking up from a vivid dream that still lingered on my skin. And yet, he was still here, not just in my head, not just in texts or a passing smile across a family barbecue, but here, beside me on the park bench near my street, his shoulder warm against mine, fingers tentatively brushing my knuckles every so often like he couldn't quite stop himself. We'd met here after his shift. Nothing fancy, just two guys, takeaway coffees in hand, talking about nothing and everything while the sun dipped lazily behind rows of red brick houses. The kind of evening that didn't need dressing up to feel perfect. I keep thinking your cousin's going to show up out of nowhere and drag me off by the ear, he said with a crooked grin. I laughed. Yeah. Well, let's maybe not mention the whole tense situation just yet. No need. He already thinks I snore loud enough to scare off wildlife. I raised a brow. You do? Oi. He bumped his knee against mine. You didn't seem to mind when you were curled up against me like a sleepy koala. I was cold. I lied too quickly. He just smirked. Sure you were. But then his gaze softened, lingering on me longer than it needed to. I miss it already. Me too. I admit it, quieter now. Everything felt simpler there, like it was just us. He nodded, taking a slow sip of his coffee, then resting it on the bench beside him. I've been thinking, he began, fingers now brushing mine with more intent, about how we make this real. I don't want it to fade just because the trip's over. I looked down at our hands, close, nearly touching, but not quite. My heart thudded quietly in my chest. "You're not scared?" I asked. He paused. "Terrified," he said. "But also, I'd regret it forever if I didn't try. Wouldn't you?" I met his eyes, saw the way they shimmered slightly in the fading light. Not with doubt, but hope. "Yeah," I said, "I would." Slowly, deliberately, I turned my hand over and linked our fingers together. He looked down at them, then back at me, and that smile, small but radiant, spread across his face like sunlight after rain. Not flashy, not loud, just right. We sat like that for a while, our joined hands resting between us, a quiet symbol of something beginning, something real. "So," he said eventually, "I was thinking there's a gallery opening next weekend. Tiny indie place. Probably full of weird abstract sculptures that look like broken kettles. Want to go with me? As your boyfriend?" His ears flushed pink. "Well, yeah, if you want." I leaned into him a little more. "I want." He beamed. "Brilliant. Just promise not to mock the art too loudly. I'll be trying to look sophisticated." "No promises." I grinned. A pair of kids raced past us on scooters, followed by a tired-looking dad yelling something about dinner. The world moved on around us, full of ordinary things. And yet, this moment felt quietly extraordinary, because in all its simplicity, a coffee, a bench, a hand held without fear, it meant everything. He gave my hand a gentle squeeze, then leaned his head against mine. "You know," he murmured, "you still never gave me back that hoodie." I smirked. "Maybe I'll keep it. Then I guess I'll just have to come over and steal it back." I glanced sideways at him. "You'd better. I sleep better when it smells like you." He turned toward me, eyes soft with something I still couldn't quite believe was mine. "This isn't going to be easy, is it?" "No," I said honestly. "But I think the hard part was not having you." His thumb brushed lightly over mine, and he leaned in, pressing the gentlest kiss to my temple. It wasn't grand. It wasn't rushed. It was ours. We sat there long after the light faded, our shadows stretching out behind us on the pavement like quiet promises. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what came next, because he was beside me, and we were just getting started.